In the wake of the new GD 2.2 trailer, I've been seeing a lot of misinformation spread as to what the FPS bypass bug is and what the mod does. And I've also seen a lot of people claim that, oh, in 2.2, MegaHack could just develop a mod that adds the old 2.1 features back and allows you to play 2.1 physics in 2.2 so that we can keep taking advantage of 360 Hz. In this video, I'm going to explain exactly why that would be cheating, and I'm also going to explain, just in general, as much as I can about this situation so people understand. So, to explain this, I'm going to start all the way from the beginning and explain what the bug and mod actually are. So, in Geometry Dash, there is a mathematical value known as ticks per second. Ticks, to explain what this is, ticks are basically the amount of little movements that happen in the span of a second. See, when a game calculates movements, normally it's not going to just calculate one fluid motion from beginning to end. And games differ on this, but in GD's case, the player actually moves a tiny little jitter one at a time in the span of a second. So, in the case of unmodified copy of the game with standard hardware, most people will be running at 60 ticks per second. And we'll get into why the hardware and stuff can influence that later, but just know that the across-the-board, intended by the developer way the game will function, is 60 FPS. The reason this matters is because if I slow the game down with a mod tool, you can actually see the player moving one little jitter at a time, and you can see how massive these little jitters are. It is in between these that the game will register movement. So if I click and hold, it will not jump until the next movement. So if I click here, no movement will happen. But if I click and hold, a movement will happen because it's waiting for the next frame. This is how the game functions across the board, and usually if you jump, it's going to jump at the next tick after your click. This is why, for when we get to it, and we'll mention how this works in a bit, but this is why higher ticks per second rates give you an advantage, because at 360, you'll notice that the player's jitters are closer together, which means you're actually moving, or you're able to jump on more places in 1 second, basically. So, due to this, a lot of people prefer playing on 360 because you can imagine how playing with the player moving like this would make something like a frame perfect way easier. Now, the reason the game behaves like this is really interesting, and I'll get to that, but just know that across the board, the game will move you exactly 60 jitters in a second, or 60 ticks. So, eventually, at some point it kind of happened during 1.9 and 2.0, it was like in that transitional period, people discovered that if you play on a monitor that has a higher refresh rate than 60, your frame rate will also go up because the game's frame rate is locked to your refresh rate. Now, this wouldn't normally matter, except as it turns out, your ticks per second is also tied to your frames per second. What this means is that if you have a 360 Hz monitor, your frame rate will go up to 360, and you will there move 360 ticks in a second, giving the player an advantage. This is a huge problem because this can turn GD into a pay-to-win game. And so we ended up with two routes we could take as a community. The first is we ban high refresh rate monitors. And this doesn't mean you can't use your monitor that you already own. It is possible to go into Windows settings and lower your monitor's refresh rate to 60. It is a thing you can entirely do, and even if you don't want to do that, you can disable VSync and it will lock the game's TPS to 60. On the other hand, what could also be done is we could develop a mod that allows all players to bypass up to the highest possible monitor refresh rate, giving every player the same even playing field. This refresh rate would be 360, as that was the most realistic high-end refresh rate monitor you could get at the time. This is kind of funny in hindsight, because now you can get 500 refresh rate monitors, and people have been making jokes about that, but just know this logic is why 360 Hz monitors were the chosen value. So, now we're caught up on how it works. This is why bypass exists. It's to even the playing field in the wake of a bug that could turn the game pay to win. So, why does this affect 2.2, and why would doing this in 2.2 be cheating? Well, 2.2 is going to make it so that your ticks per second are no longer tied to your frames per second. Meaning, and we don't know exactly how the physics are going to work, but RobTop has said that it plays like the equivalent of 240 ticks per second. This means that regardless of your frame rate, which there is a frame rate slider in-game, you can set your frame rate to whatever you want. Regardless of your frame rate, the player will always move at a rate similar to this. Which means, if you download a mod that changes the physics and allows you to make the player move at more ticks than this, you're altering the physics in a way that cannot be done without a mod, and therefore that makes it cheating, because you are playing the game in a way it is not intended to be played in, and yeah, you can't do this without a mod. So, as dry of an explanation as this is, I really hope this suffices as to explaining exactly what this bug is, how it's being fixed in 2.2, and why it being fixed means bypass will most likely never be allowed in the future. I hope I explained this thoroughly and well, and I'm sorry this video is really dry, but yeah, thank you for watching.